In the world of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, the One Ring holds a power that could reshape the destiny of Middle-earth. The thought of it falling into the hands of the Witch King, the leader of the Nazgul and Sauron's most feared servant, is a chilling prospect. What if the Witch King of Angmar, instead of Sauron, had claimed the One Ring? How would the balance of power shift? What dark future would unfold for the free peoples of Middle-earth? In this video, we will explore this terrifying scenario, examining the potential consequences of the Witch King wielding the One Ring and what it would mean for Middle-earth. When the Witch King of Angmar seizes the One Ring, the power dynamic in Middle-earth shifts dramatically. The immediate aftermath of such an event would be catastrophic for all who oppose the forces of darkness. The One Ring, crafted by Sauron himself, amplifies the power and malevolence of its wielder to unimaginable heights. For the Witch King, already a figure of immense dread and authority as the leader of the Nazgul, this would mean a significant and terrifying transformation. The Witch King's connection to Sauron, established through his subservience as one of the Ring Wraiths, would be radically altered. With the One Ring in his possession, the Witch King would no longer be merely a servant, but a potential rival to Sauron's dominion. The power of the ring would intensify his abilities, making him even more formidable than before. His already fearsome presence, capable of striking terror into the hearts of men, would be magnified 100-fold. The shadows that clung to him, the darkness that he wielded, would now be infused with the corrupting power of the ring, making him a creature of both shadow and flame, far surpassing the fear he once inspired. The other Nazgul, bound by their own rings of power and their servitude to Sauron, would find themselves drawn irresistibly to the Witch King's new power. The One Ring's malevolent influence could potentially shift their allegiance from Sauron to their newly empowered leader. In this scenario, the Witch King might consolidate his position by asserting dominance over the other Ring Wraiths, creating a dark court that answers directly to him. This new hierarchy would represent a shift in the power structure of Mordor, as the Witch King would no longer be a mere lieutenant, but a power in his own right, with followers who might fear or worship him as they once did Sauron. Beyond the immediate effects on the Nazgul, the Witch King's ambitions would likely expand. No longer merely Sauron's instrument of terror, he could begin to harbor thoughts of conquest and dominion on his own terms. The ring would whisper to him, feeding his desires, pushing him toward a destiny where he could become the supreme ruler of Middle-earth. This ambition, long buried under Sauron's shadow, would now come to the fore. Driven by the ring's insidious influence, the Witch King, once content to serve, might now seek to rule. In the broader context of Middle-earth, the Witch King's acquisition of the One Ring would send shockwaves across the land. The free peoples, already struggling against Sauron's growing power, would find themselves facing a new and even more unpredictable threat. The Witch King, with his newfound power, could extend his influence beyond Mordor, spreading darkness and despair across the realms of men, elves, and dwarves. The lands that had resisted Sauron might now fall under the Witch King's shadow, as his armies grow stronger, bolstered by the ring's power. The potential conflict between the Witch King and Sauron would be one of the most significant and devastating events in this alternate timeline. Sauron, the original Dark Lord and the creator of the One Ring, would not easily relinquish his claim to it. However, with the ring in the Witch King's possession, Sauron's power would be severely weakened. The ring is the source of much of Sauron's strength, and without it he would be diminished. unable to exert his will over Middle-earth as effectively as before. A confrontation between the two would be inevitable. The Witch King, empowered by the ring, would now be in a position to challenge his former master. The battle between them would not merely be a physical one, but a clash of wills, dark magic, and ancient evil. Sauron, desperate to reclaim the ring, might use all the resources at his disposal to destroy the Witch King or bend him once more to his will. However, the Witch King, driven by the ring's power, would be relentless in his pursuit of supremacy. The struggle between them could tear Mordor apart, unleashing chaos and destruction as the two Dark Lords vie for control. In this conflict, the Witch King's own mastery of dark sorcery and his control over the Nazgul would be significant advantages. He could use the power of the ring to amplify his abilities, creating powerful enchantments and unleashing devastating attacks against Sauron. The Witch King might also seek to corrupt or coerce Sauron's other minions, turning them against their former master. Orcs, trolls, and other creatures of darkness could be drawn to the Witch King's new power, swelling his ranks and giving him the strength needed to challenge Sauron directly. If the Witch King were to emerge victorious from this struggle, the consequences for Middle-earth would be dire. Sauron's fall wouldn't bring about a restoration of peace, but rather the rise of a new Dark Lord, one potentially even more dangerous than Sauron himself. The Witch King, with his newfound power, could reshape Mordor into his own image, creating an empire of terror and darkness that would extend far beyond the borders of the Black Land. His rule would be marked by cruelty, fear, and domination, as the free peoples of Middle-earth find themselves facing a new and terrifying enemy. The impact of the Witch King's power would be felt most acutely in Gondor, the last bastion of resistance against the forces of Mordor. The Siege of Gondor, already a pivotal event in the War of the Ring, would take on a new and even more desperate significance with the Witch King in possession of the One Ring. The Witch King, leading the assault on Minas Tirith, would be an unstoppable force, his power enhanced by the ring. The great city, already under siege, would face a foe of unimaginable strength. The Witch King's armies, driven by his newfound power, would be relentless in their assault on Gondor. The walls of Minas Tirith, once thought impregnable, would tremble under the force of the Witch King's attacks. The ring would grant him the ability to command the elements, summoning storms and darkness to weaken the defenders. His presence alone would spread fear and despair among the soldiers of Gondor, undermining their resolve and making them more vulnerable to his attacks. In this scenario, the defenders of Minas Tirith would be hard-pressed to find any hope of victory. The forces of Rohan, led by King Theoden, would still ride to the city's aid, but even their arrival might not be enough to turn the tide against the Witch King's overwhelming power. The riders of Rohan, brave and determined as they are, would face an enemy who cannot be defeated by ordinary means. The Witch King, with the ring's power, would be immune to conventional weapons, and his dark magic could wreak havoc on the battlefield, turning the tide of battle in his favor. The presence of Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and other key figures of the Fellowship would still be critical, but their struggle against the Witch King would be far more desperate. Even with the power of Andúril, the reforged sword of Elendil, Aragorn might find himself unable to match the Witch King's power. The outcome of the Battle of Pelennor Fields in this scenario could be very different, with the forces of darkness emerging victorious. The fall of Minas Tirith would be a devastating blow to the Free Peoples, marking the beginning of the end for their resistance. The consequences of the Witch King's victory at Minas Tirith would ripple across Middle-earth. With Gondor fallen, the remaining strongholds of the Free Peoples would be vulnerable to attack. The elves of Lothlorien and Rivendell, the dwarves of Erebor, and the men of Rohan would find themselves besieged by the Witch King's forces. The darkness spreading from Mordor would seem unstoppable as the Witch King, empowered by the ring, extends his dominion across the land. In the end, the Witch King's acquisition of the One Ring would bring about a dark and terrible age in Middle-earth, where the forces of good struggle to find any hope of victory. The land would be plunged into despair, and the Free Peoples, once united in their resistance against Sauron, would now face an even greater threat in the form of the Witch King. His reign, marked by cruelty, terror, and darkness, would represent the ultimate triumph of evil in Tolkien's world. The One Ring is a powerful and malevolent artifact created by Sauron to control and dominate all other rings of power and their bearers. Its primary purpose is to corrupt, to twist the will and desires of whoever possesses it until they are nothing more than an extension of Sauron's own dark ambitions. The Witch King of Angmar, despite being a formidable and fearsome entity, is not immune to the ring's insidious influence. The process of corruption would be inevitable and, in the case of the Witch King, potentially even more catastrophic than it might have been for others. Initially, the Witch King would likely feel a surge of power upon acquiring the ring, a sense of invincibility that would drive him to pursue his ambitions with newfound fervor. The ring would amplify his darkest desires, making him more ruthless and aggressive in his actions. His cruelty, already legendary, would know no bounds as he seeks to impose his will on Middle-earth. However, the ring's power comes at a cost, and that cost is the gradual erosion of the wielder's autonomy and identity. As the Witch King continues to wield the ring, the boundaries between his own will and that of the ring would begin to blur. The ring, which is intrinsically linked to Sauron, would start to exert its influence over him, whispering to him, feeding his paranoia, and deepening his hunger for power. The Witch King, once a powerful but still distinct entity, would slowly find himself becoming a vessel for the ring's malevolent will. This process would not happen overnight, but it would be relentless, an inexorable slide into madness and despair. The ring's power lies not just in its ability to enhance the abilities of its bearer, but in its capacity to corrupt and consume them. The Witch King, already a figure of immense darkness, would find his remaining shreds of individuality being stripped away. His thoughts would become consumed by the ring, his every action dictated by its influence. The ambition that initially drove him to claim the ring would twist into obsession, a single-minded desire to dominate all of Middle-earth, but at the expense of his own essence. This corruption would manifest in various ways. The Witch King might become increasingly isolated, trusting no one, not even the other Nazgul who once followed him without question. Paranoia would take hold, as the ring's whispers sow doubt and suspicion in his mind. He might see threats where there are none, perceiving betrayal from his closest allies. The dark powers he wields would grow more unstable, driven by the chaotic influence of the ring. His actions would become more erratic as he struggles to maintain control over the immense power he has unleashed. The physical and metaphysical effects of the ring on the Witch King would also be profound. The ring, drawing on his fear and hatred, would further transform him into a being of pure malice. The Witch King's form, already shrouded in darkness, might become even less tangible, less anchored to the physical world, as the ring pulls him deeper into the shadowy realm of the wraiths. His presence would become a vortex of fear and despair, affecting all those around him. The darkness that once radiated from him would now consume everything in its path, an all-encompassing void that leaves nothing but desolation in its wake. However, the ultimate question remains: would the Witch King, even in his most corrupted state, be able to resist the ring's final, most dangerous temptation? The ring's ultimate goal is to return to Sauron, to reunite with its true master. Despite the Witch King's newfound power, the ring would continue to exert its influence, pulling him towards Sauron, urging him to return the artifact to its creator. The internal struggle within the Witch King would be intense. On one hand, his desire to wield the ring's power for his own ends would push him to defy Sauron. But on the other hand, the ring's compulsion would draw him inexorably back to its true master. If the Witch King succumbs to the ring's influence, he might find himself becoming a mere puppet of Sauron once more, albeit one with immense power. The Witch King's identity, his very essence, would be subsumed by the will of Sauron, leaving him as nothing more than a vessel for the Dark Lord's power. In this state, the Witch King would be a being of pure destruction, driven solely by the desire to fulfill Sauron's will, with no trace of his former self remaining. On the other hand, if the Witch King somehow manages to resist this compulsion, to assert his own will over that of the ring, he might find himself in a constant, never-ending battle against its influence. This struggle would consume him, driving him further into madness and despair as he fights to maintain control over the power he has unleashed. In this scenario, the Witch King might become a tragic figure, a being of immense power and terror, but one doomed to be forever enslaved by the very artifact that gave him that power. The long-term consequences of the Witch King's reign with the One Ring would be catastrophic for Middle-earth. If the Witch King were to fully embrace the ring's power and consolidate his dominion, the world would be plunged into an age of darkness and despair from which there might be no escape. The free peoples of Middle-earth, already weakened by the wars against Sauron, would find themselves facing an enemy of unprecedented power. The Witch King, with the ring's power at his command, would be unstoppable, his dominion spreading like a shadow across the land. The natural world itself would suffer under the Witch King's rule. The forests, rivers, and mountains, all once vibrant and full of life, would wither under his influence. The land would become barren, the skies perpetually darkened by the clouds of Mordor, and the very air would be thick with despair. The once great cities of men, elves, and dwarves would fall into ruin, their inhabitants either enslaved or driven into hiding. The world would become a place of perpetual fear, where hope is nothing more than a distant memory. The surviving free peoples would be forced into desperate alliances, banding together in a last-ditch effort to resist the Witch King's rule. However, these efforts might prove futile in the face of his overwhelming power. Even the mightiest of warriors and the wisest of leaders would struggle to find a way to counter the ring's influence. The elves, with their ancient knowledge, might attempt to find a way to destroy the ring, but such a task would be nearly impossible with the Witch King's power at its peak. In this dark future, the remnants of the free peoples might be driven underground, forced to live in secret, constantly on the run from the Witch King's armies. resistance would become a matter of survival rather than a fight for freedom, with small bands of rebels waging a guerrilla war against an enemy that cannot be defeated. The memory of a free Middle-earth would fade, replaced by the harsh reality of a world dominated by darkness and terror. The ring's influence would continue to spread, corrupting not just the Witch King, but also those around him. Even the strongest-willed individuals might find themselves succumbing to its power, drawn to the darkness like moths to a flame. The corruption of the ring would reach into the very hearts of the free peoples, turning friends into enemies and allies into traitors. The bonds of fellowship that once held the free peoples together would be shattered, replaced by distrust, fear, and betrayal. In this bleak future, the very concept of hope might become a distant memory. The light of the Valar, the ancient powers that once guided and protected Middle-earth, would seem dim and far away. The songs and stories of old, once filled with tales of heroism and triumph, would become mournful dirges, lamenting the loss of a world that could have been. The age of men, elves, and dwarves would come to an end, replaced by an age of darkness where the Witch King's rule is absolute. The ultimate fate of Middle-earth under the Witch King's dominion would likely be one of stagnation and decay. The Witch King, consumed by his own power and the ring's influence, might eventually lose all sense of purpose beyond the endless pursuit of domination. Without Sauron's guiding vision, the Witch King's reign could devolve into mindless tyranny, a never-ending cycle of conquest and destruction with no goal other than to perpetuate his own power. The world would be locked in a state of perpetual darkness, with no possibility of renewal or rebirth. However, even in this darkest of futures, there might still be a glimmer of hope. The ring, for all its power, is not indestructible. If a hero were to rise, someone with the courage and strength to resist the ring's influence, there might still be a chance to end the Witch King's reign. This hero might be a new figure, someone unknown to the histories of Middle-earth, or they might be one of the few surviving members of the Fellowship, still holding on to the hope of a free world. The task would be nearly impossible, requiring immense sacrifice and bravery, but it is not beyond the realm of possibility. In the end, the Witch King's acquisition of the One Ring represents the ultimate triumph of darkness over light in Middle-earth. It is a scenario where the forces of evil are allowed to achieve their full potential with devastating consequences for the world. However, even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, the possibility of resistance, however slim, remains. The history of Middle-earth is filled with tales of heroes who stood against impossible odds, and in this darkest of futures, there might still be room for one last act of defiance against the shadow.